Hello, my name is William Wilbanks, and this is Hunter, Connor, and Clayton. The great Lawrence once said, "Steroids are for guys who want to cheat opponents." I play baseball and I know a lot about sports and certain athletes who have cheated by using steroids and are banned from certain sports because of them partaking in these activities. This has made them some of the most hated athletes in the game because of them taking the steroids. For example, Lance Armstrong's life is interesting because 1 second he's at the top, and then the next, when he gets caught for taking steroids, he is at the very bottom and thought of as the worst person in that sport and will always be known as that. Today, I'd like to inform you all about Lance Armstrong and the cyclist who is known for taking steroids and been known as a cheater around the world. I've divided the life of Lance Armstrong into time periods. The early life, the peak of his career, and everything he has achieved, and the worst part of his career. Let's start with the early part of Lance's life. If you aren't that good with sports and don't keep up with it that well, I would recommend looking online at a website about Lance's life and the history behind his steroid usage. Lance Armstrong was always a great athlete even at his young age and first started off as a triathlete before he became a famous cyclist. Armstrong became a very well-known cyclist and won many races, including winning the Cycling Triple Crown, the Thrift Road Classic, the Kmart West Virginia Classic, and the Core States Race, the U.S. Professional Championship, and did very well in many more races. Armstrong was diagnosed with testicular cancer, and he went from having a 65 to 85% chance of living, and then they found out there was more tumors on his brain, and his chances went from 50-50 and then eventually to 40%. After the tumors were removed from his brain and several rounds of chemotherapy, he was declared cancer-free in 1997. That's Armstrong's early life and events that occurred in his life, and this is his peak performance and his all-time high of his career. After beating cancer, Lance Armstrong started performing at his best. By this point, Armstrong had won many cycling events, and in 1998, Armstrong raced in his first race since battling cancer, which was the Tour of Luxembourg. He proved that he was back and ready because he won the first stage of the race. Over a year later, he capped his comeback by becoming the second American to win the Tour de France. He repeated that in July 2000 and followed that with a bronze medal in the Summer Olympic Games. He then went on and won the Tour in 2001-2012. He ended up tying the record for most wins in Tour de France history. He won his 6th Tour in 2004, then won his 7th in 2005, and won 5 stages in that race. After racing a couple more races, he announced that he was retiring for good in February 2011. Which brings me to my last point. Armstrong's fame going down the drain and him getting caught for steroids was, at the first, Armstrong denied using steroids, and he eventually gave up fighting against the USADA recent charges. He said enough is enough and gave up on that because the case was too stressful and caused too much stress on his family. On August 24, 2012, the USADA came out and announced that he would be stripped of his 7 tour titles and his other accolades from 1999 to 2005. He was also banned from cycling. In 2013, Lance Armstrong admitting of using steroids on the Oprah Winfrey Show. Armstrong admitted using steroids and admitted to blood doping. Blood doping is the practice of increasing red blood cells in order to enhance athletic ability. A higher blood capacity can increase endurance. Armstrong told Oprah that he felt like he wasn't doing anything wrong, which he was, and he viewed it as a level playing field. And what I've talked to y'all about today was the steroid usage and how it can make people's careers go down the drain, and it'll just make you go from good to the worst. And his Armstrong's steroid problem was a terrible idea, and that's what happens in sports. If you do steroids, it will make everybody turn their back on you and not like you anymore. I think Armstrong still would have been a great athlete and had a great story if he would have stepped down from the sport after he beat cancer, but he decided to cheat the sport by taking steroids and blood doping, and now he's looked at as a cheater and someone who cheated the system.